1, 3, 4, 5, 6. This works. Good morning, everyone. Try that again.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, bonjour. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
We are here for day 2 of our national conference. And as you would see on your program, we're going to be having a virtual panel discussion. But before we do that, I would like us to all stand, and I'm going to open in a word of prayer. Dear God, we thank you for vitality and life and the ability to be here this morning, dear God. I pray that you would continue to be with us in this conference, dear God, to continue to give us the wit and the wisdom to influence and put into our national youth policy. I pray that you would be with all our presenters today, that they'll be able to present with fluidity and clarity. And we thank you for everything you're about to do with us today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I have to acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Youth, Honorable. My throat. No. Sorry about that. I'll have to get some water. Before we continue to our virtual panel discussion, we're going to have one of our repertoires, Felicia Hennis, come and give us a review of yesterday. And then I'm going to introduce the moderator for our panel discussion, and we'll continue from there. Welcome, Felicia. Put your hands together.
Good morning. So I'll be presenting a synopsis on what took place yesterday. Farah and I will submit a comprehensive report to the ministry and DYC in the coming days. So yesterday, the conference began with an opening ceremony with speeches from officials, the Director of Youth and Culture, Ms. Avon Carty, President of the Anguilla National Youth Council, Mr. Neil Gams, and Dean of the National Youth Ambassador Corps, Cassim Ford. All three highlighted the importance of the policy and emphasized the need for young people to give their input into the program. The Honorable Minister of Social Development, Ms. Deanne Kentish-Rogers, delivered the feature address where she gave government's commitment for the inclusion of young people in decision-making. She also underscored the need for the youth to have a voice in issues that affect them. She thanked the young people for their participation and stated, "Nothing about us without us. Be the generation that create history." Yesterday's agenda also included a presentation by Mr. Charles Henry. He outlined the policy in great detail. Just to highlight a few areas, he spoke on the policy benchmarks. He said the policy should be inclusive and should not discriminate. It should be participatory. He also looked at defining the youth in the context of the policy, the chronological age from 13 to 30, the strategic objectives we looked at. These include creating safe spaces and peaceful societies, promoting healthy lifestyles for the youths to be engaged. Enhance youth contribution to food security. He said this is an important factor for most of the regional countries in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And he also spoke about the importance of the young people in this area. Mr. Henry also spoke about the 6 C's of positive youth development: character, connection, creating safety and belonging, competence, confidence, and caring, showing sympathy and empathy to others. Finally, we touch on the 8 pillars. The strategic priorities include embracing youth economic participation in Anguilla, optimizing youth social and intellectual capital, prioritizing inclusive and active youth participation in the civic and democratic life of Anguilla, creating safe spaces, peaceful communities, and nurturing environments. Emphasizing youth engagement in achieving Anguilla's food security, Mr. Henry said this is a major initiative for all countries. Supporting youth action on climate change, environmental sustainability, and disaster mitigation. Again, he spoke about this because we in the Caribbean have been impacted by hurricanes. Improving the institutional arrangements and policy environment for positive youth development in Anguilla. In the afternoon, there was a group session where each group was given one of the pillars to assess and to discuss. While there were specific areas that were addressed in the policy by each group, most persons felt that there was need to simplify some of the words to make it more youth-friendly and easier for young people to understand. However, Mr. Charles said that the wording in the document was specific for representation on the regional and international stage when communicating with other government agencies. However, he suggested that a softer copy can be made on the local level so the youths can fully understand the policy. Like I said, this is just a summary of what took place yesterday. A comprehensive report will be given in a couple days. Thank you.
I think she can get a better hand than that. Come on. Okay, so we're going to get into our virtual panel discussion. And firstly, I'm going to invite my co-moderator for this morning, who is none other than youth parliamentarian Janine Phillips. Janine was born on July 25th, 2002, right here in the beautiful island of Anguilla. And she's a graduate of the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School with a dream of one day becoming an accountant and later an entrepreneur. As an ambitious young lady who is courageous, helpful, and outspoken, with a passion for helping others and giving a listening ear. She decided to join Anguilla Youth Parliament and holds the position of Attorney General since March 2009 until present. She enjoys traveling around the world and exploring new things while spending quality time with her loved ones. Put your hands together and welcome Youth Parliamentarian Janine Phillips.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes. The first panelist that we are going to introduce today is very familiar to us already from yesterday, Mr. Henry Wallace Charles. Mr. Charles is an internationally recognized youth and policy development expert with over 30 years of experience in youth development. He has served as the lead consultant for the Caribbean Development Bank's first youth policy and operational strategy, youth policy consultant for Turks and Caicos Islands, Belize, and Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Grenada. He is a founding member of the St. Lucia National Youth Council and served as Public Relations Officer and Vice President, respectively, between 1985 to 1991. He is also a founding member and served as Secretary-Treasurer of the Caribbean Federation of Youth from 1987 to 1989. He is a member of the University of the West Indies Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies 50/50 Youth Research Cluster. He has also served as a member of the Advisory Board for the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. Mr. Charles is a former Regional Director of the Commonwealth Youth Program Caribbean Center from 2005 to 2011, as well as former Interim Director of Youth Affairs Division of the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. Mr. Charles is a PhD in Social Policy candidate at UWI St. Augustine. His thesis is on the socio-political context of youth and policy development in the Caribbean. He has provided technical support to several Caribbean governments and youth development stakeholders on youth and policy development strategy. He has authored and presented several academic and technical papers on youth development, youth participation, the socio-political context of youth development, youth governance, youth economic empowerment, and the professionalization of youth development work. Additionally, he has undertaken and contributed to several youth development initiatives in the Caribbean, including a mapping of best practices in youth engagement for UNDP Barbados and the OECS in 2012, being part of a multidisciplinary team that undertook an assessment of the youth development situation in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean on behalf of USAID. Review of Grenada and Dominica's, Turks and Caicos Islands, Belize, and Trinidad and Tobago national youth policies. Facilitating Anguilla's 8th National Development Conference. Conducting an institutional review of the Division of Youth Affairs and formulation of youth development strategy for the Tobago House of Assembly. Developing course outline and modules for the Masters of Science in Child and Youth Studies for the Department of Behavioral Sciences at UWI St. Augustine. Instructional designer for 3 of the Bachelor of Science in Youth Development work courses. Mr. Charles was chief of party for a USAID-funded assessment of the youth development situation in Haiti in 2016 to 2017. He is a part-time lecturer for both the Masters of Education Youth Guidance and Master of Science Child and Youth Studies at UWI St. Augustine campus. He also served as a member of the Caribbean Development Bank Youth Policy and Statutory Reference Group. Ladies and gentlemen, Henry Wallace Charles.
Yeah, Kasim, you're trying to set me up here, Kasim. Good morning. Anyway, thank you. Thank you. Yesterday, I think ladies and gentlemen, you would have heard a lot of my presentation regarding the policy and contextualizing the policy in terms of what is happening regionally, globally. Also recognizing that, yes, youth development is happening locally, but it's also linked. There is, in fact, that link between what is happening locally, what is happening regionally, and in fact, what is happening internationally, as well as much as we localize it, it is also important if we want to be able to elevate youth development into the sphere that we want it. If we want our governments, local and regional, to be able to take youth development on board in a very strategic, in a very serious way, we must continue to make the case that youth development is not a little hobby down the road where we organize a tea party to look after those unfortunate young people who may have suffered, who may have been deprived of a certain thing, or who may not be performing at the optimal in terms of schooling, or who, may just have some grievance. The youth development, and as my other colleagues I'm sure will go in that direction, youth development is really about how do we assist government, how do we assist the development stakeholders in our country and in the region appreciate, cherish, value, and respect young people as a valuable asset, that we cannot achieve our sustainable development goals unless we have young people on board, not just as passive, or what they call them, as spectators, but that we have young people on board in a very serious way, that we engage them, that we create the opportunities and the spaces for us to engage them. So we made that point. The policy itself, as we presented yesterday, was contextualized there. So there is the delicate link that has been made between what is very localized and and linking it to that broader strategy in terms of ensuring that there is a framework, a guiding framework for the government to be able to integrate, for want of a better phrase, young people, to bring them front and center. As the minister indicated, it is the intention of this government and maybe future governments to bring young people front and center in the development. That don't just happen, okay? If we just leave it to just the words and the wishes of our very good and kind ladies and gentlemen in government, it will never happen. We must establish the frameworks. We must advocate for it. We must ourselves as youth leaders, those of you who are youth leaders, must not just rest on the fact that you are young. You must do the kind of research. You must do the kind of get yourself familiar with some of the instruments that exist, okay? You should, as leaders, have at the tip of your fingers, what is the Convention on the Rights of the Child is saying? What is relevant to me? What is in the Curriculum Youth Development Action Plan? What is, you need to inform yourself so that you enhance your capacity to better represent yourself and advocate on your behalf. And so what is going to happen this morning, I see is a direct link between yesterday and today. Youth development, one of the critical aspects of youth development is that of what we call stakeholder engagement. We cannot do it alone. We are in this thing together. You notice yesterday we spoke about co-creation and co-creating and what it means. So that it is not of different, we run in different directions, each doing their own thing and never shall we meet. It's about working together. It's about knowing what others are doing. It's about also showing respect for our stakeholders, that we don't bring them at the end, that we bring them as part of the process, so that you can understand what they're doing, okay? You know, for instance, if there are gaps in your own situation, how are you going to engage with them and work with them to accomplish your own local development objectives, but also how are you, because Anguilla, as I've always said, have some very progressive young people who are always upfront in articulating in terms of the way forward for youth development. And it is reflected in the fact that when you look at the composition of your government, you look at even the number of young persons who was involved in the political process is a reflection of that. So it's an opportunity to learn from them. It's an opportunity to share with them, but it's also an opportunity to give them some guidance so that they now, our colleagues now at the Commonwealth, at the CARICOM, at the CDB, can be energized and be and receive your wise counsel so that they can do an even better job than they are already doing by way of impacting the young people of the Caribbean and the Commonwealth. These are just the few words I want to share this morning ahead of my colleagues. Thank you. Again, one love, and continue the good work that you're doing all the time.
Secondly, Lane Robinson. Lane Robinson leads the Commonwealth work on social policy with particular focus on youth, education, health and gender policy, provides technical advice to Commonwealth member states, work in partnership with relevant organizations to improve the lives of Commonwealth citizens. An experienced policy head with a demonstrative history of working in the public policy industry, skilled in youth development, government, research, program design and implementation, public speaking, facilitation, and international relations. Strong consulting professional with a graduate degree focused on development economics and political science from the University of the West Indies, Mona, Lane Robinson.
Oops, thank you very much. I hope you're hearing me clearly. It's very good to be a part of the session today and to share thoughts on and discuss with you how, from a Commonwealth standpoint, we can contribute to this co-creating sustainable futures discussion that you're having in Anguilla. I thank Henry for his introduction and the rapporteur for yesterday's work, and I'll share a little bit about what the Commonwealth can do and contribute in this space going forward. I'll share a presentation that you can then take and use going forward, but I'll try my best to share some of the ideas as was expressed by the organizers for us to respond to. I'll begin by having a discussion on what the Commonwealth is. The Commonwealth Youth Program is a program that has a dedicated focus on young people for over 45 years. That's a long history of having engagement on youth issues. And it's an intergovernmental organization, which I think means that we work with governments and other stakeholders to ensure that we are doing the best for the young people in our member states. So we assist governments in developing and implementing policies and programs that target young people aged 15 to 29 years old. The Commonwealth's vision for young people is a Commonwealth where young people are empowered. They have the knowledge, the skills, and the competencies to deal with the multiple complex issues that they face. And they can utilize this potential towards their own fulfillment. They can partner and lead governments and institutions and structures towards the betterment of their societies. So we have a bold and a brave vision for young people in Anguilla that has them being the ones who take charge of their own future. So they contribute to development outcomes. They work in partnership with others to seize on the opportunities available while dealing with the challenges that they face. Our philosophy is a simple one. Our guiding principle is a simple one. It's this concept of youth empowerment. And I think all of us will come back to this concept of what does that mean? It means for us economically empowering young people so they can participate in the economic welfare of the country. So it's dealing with those issues that deal with unemployment, it's dealing with the economic infrastructure of the country. What is happening with economic growth in the country? It's that economic empowerment. Then talk about the political empowerment, the opportunity for young people to contribute to the decision-making processes at all the levels, from the church group all the way to the national development, national decision-making process. How are young people engaged in those processes? And of course, socially, on the issues that define our day in education and employment and health, and so on. How are young people contributing to dealing with social injustice issues across Anguilla, indeed across the Commonwealth? In the Commonwealth, there are different approaches you could have taken, and one that we support here is on the asset-based approach, which Henry mentions. We don't believe that young people are a problem to be fixed. That's the deficit approach. We don't believe that young people should only be used as tools. So you use them and just because you need their energy and their creativity. No, we believe that young people have something meaningful to contribute, and hence we go for this asset-based approach where we call for governments to include young people in and work with young people as citizens that can actually add value to our country's development. For the Commonwealth, we don't have country offices, and I think those who set up the institution and those who have gone before, like Henry, would know why. Because in the countries, our main stakeholder is the Ministry of Youth, or the Youth Council, or indeed the Youth Workers Association. In the countries where we work or anything, any emphasis of work, it is through the mechanisms in the country. The Commonwealth supports the Ministry and Department of Youth. It supports the National Youth Council to do their work, because we see our role as to create thoughts or thought ideas, to create and facilitate connections, to build capacity and to demonstrate where people can inspire change. But that change only comes at the grassroots level through the mechanism that the country has. So if you will, the people who are on this call, those who are listening, you are the part of this youth program that we hope to see the impact in Anguilla going forward. In terms of what the Commonwealth could offer and has offered and will continue to offer Anguilla, we have 4 strategic areas that are of note. One is on revising youth policy. That's something that is going on now. But we also have a strategy on implementing youth policy. Look at the programs and initiatives that are in the policy to implement. Our focus in terms of this policy has been twofold. We want to see evidence-based youth policy. So the push over this strategic period for us is, how do you make sure the policy is based on evidence, both qualitative and quantitative? The second big push is on mainstreaming youth, and I'll speak more about that later. How do you make sure that youth policy doesn't just sit in the Department of Youth? It goes across all of government. I'll speak more about that. So that's one priority area, youth policy, evidence-based and a mainstream youth policy. Second is on entrepreneurship and employment. We have a laser beam focus on employment and entrepreneurship because every study that we have seen says this is the challenge of our day. We have an unemployment crisis in the world that many don't talk about, but it's going to be a tsunami if it hits us eventually, and COVID has accelerated that. A third area of focus is on youth participation and engagement. How do you make sure that the young people have, they tap into not just sharing among themselves, but they're able to share with others, a variety of other stakeholders, their thoughts, their perspectives for change for the future, for change for now. How do we make sure that youth networks are strong, that they have those institutions in place that can rise to the occasion to challenge and contribute to the defining moments of our day. And then finally, we have a particular focus on youth work, making youth work much better than what it is. Youth work is a profession that many know about, but there's little investments in it. How do you make sure that the people who work with youth get the best outcome because they are supported and we enhance their knowledge, their skills and capacities? So we have a particular focus on not just young people themselves, but the people who work with young people. And I think that is something that I think still needs to be taken up much more across the development space, because the people who work with young people are important for youth development as well. So going forward, the Commonwealth has a number of opportunities that countries can benefit from, and I'll share a few of them. One, on the policy level, is what I talk about, evidence-based policy. We have a tool called the Youth Development Index, and we encourage countries to do a national development index. And what that is asks the question, how do you know that over the last 4 years or over the next 5 years, as the policy is rolled out, that you have seen actual progress? How do you measure progress in youth development? How do you ensure that over time, all the investments that are coming from all the partners on this call, how do you ensure that you're actually seeing movement along a line towards positive youth development? And so the index is a resource that we use to help countries to measure progress. And we have a global one that measures across and compare countries on how well they are doing. That's one tool. And we offer countries a national index as well, so they can develop their own national indices and track their progress over time. Then we have resources such as the guides for how do you do proper youth entrepreneurship policy? How do you do proper employment policy? In this day and age, everybody says entrepreneurship is one way to go. But how do you actually do it that in a way that actually makes an impact? It's not just putting money into a fund and say, draw down on the fund. It actually involves having a coordinated strategy across governments, across society, where you're having entrepreneurship ingrained into the education system, ingrained into the financial system, ingrained into how the whole system of employment and entrepreneurship happens, the demand and supply. So those are some tools there for consideration. I'll go on to speak a little bit about more on terms of the opportunities for some of the young people now. We have quite a variety of those. I'll share a little bit on the networks we have. We have approximately 13 youth networks. And the idea there is across the Commonwealth, every country, we are noticing that young people have a variety of interests. They're interested in climate change, in human rights, in education, interested in peace and development. They're interested in sports. They're interested in you name it, in entrepreneurship. So how do you seize on that capacity and use it for the greater good of all member states? And so we have these networks that are very open to any young person in this audience to join. And what we're saying is you become a member of the network through your national institution. And that network then can work together with other networks across the Commonwealth, other similar like-minded networks on climate change to make a change in the world. So if your country has a coalition of young people working on climate change, we connect you with a coalition of climate change in Jamaica, a coalition in Barbados, a coalition working on climate change in the United Kingdom and across the Commonwealth, so that you can together try to change the Commonwealth and the world. So we have 11 of these networks, and they're constantly open for leadership, for young people to join. And they go from as simple as you see it, students associations, national students associations, to climate change networks, entrepreneurship, peace building, sports, right across the remit of those areas that are important for young people. Indeed, the last one that we had was on children and youth with disabilities, because we're just connecting young people now who have an interest in disability issues and disability rights. So going forward, outside of the youth program or program, there is, of course, potential for young people to get involved with other areas of the Commonwealth's interest in youth, and that is from scholarships. We do need those academics who are interested in doing Commonwealth scholarships. Scholarships are intended to be a resource for young people who want to use their minds and their abilities and their knowledge to change the world. And so we work with our partners to create and to share the Commonwealth Scholarship Program that young people can tap into, study, learn how they can contribute to solving the problems that define our day. But there are also spaces for Commonwealth youth athletes outside of the youth program, but we coordinate with them. So the Commonwealth Youth Games are very popular, and it has a program of work that goes and taps into the contribution that young people who are interested in sports want to pursue. Then we have spaces for Commonwealth for young people who are interested in local government issues. Young mayors, junior mayors. Those programs are all there that are available for the interested young person to get involved. Increasingly, we have a huge number of professional associations in the Commonwealth, from Commonwealth pharmacists to Commonwealth doctors association, nurses, you name it. There are over 80 of them. And what we're encouraging is for young people, once you think you are ready, is to be a part of these professional associations to grow and contribute your professional capacity to the wider world. And so with all these 80 professional associations, some of them might be not known to you, but you can work with us to then find out how you can contribute as a young pharmacist or an architect or whatever is your profession. Over 80 of those that we offer as well. As I conclude now, let me speak specifically to how do you then co-create or how do you mainstream youth into the context of Anguilla as we come to its end. So our concept of mainstreaming is a policy approach that speaks to connecting young people into the mainstream of society, using that word. It's a strategy for closing that gap between, some people say, the older and the younger generation. It's closing that gap between the young people having access and the justice that they need in the wider world. And I'll give an example here. One of the areas that I think is ripe for mainstreaming to happen in is in the area of climate change. The world that the adults that we have now, the people that we have now, what kind of world will they leave for the young people 30 years down the road? So mainstreaming says, no, let's get young people into that conversation now, because 30 years from now, they will be the ones who are reaping that world, that environment. So if you don't have that mainstream approach where you're getting youth perspective into climate change, we will have young people today who are making decisions about the environment and about the climate that will not benefit them. It will actually affect the young people going forward. And so we are encouraged when we see young people calling for greater access to the decision-making spaces for climate change, because it's an area ripe for mainstreaming to happen. But it's not just in climate change. It needs to happen in economic development. It needs to happen in education systems. It needs to happen in health. In almost every area, in trade, in justice, we need to have that youth voice being considered as these decisions are being made for the future. And so for us, we have a 12-step program for mainstreaming. It goes from having a clear policy around this in the government, to having endorsements for it at high levels, to having stakeholder discussion and dialogue on what does this mean for our country, to having capacity building happening. So we need to strengthen those people around. You go into climate change, the people are saying, I don't know what this youth issue is. How do I work with young people? Capacity needs to be built there. You go into trade or justice, the people there say, I don't know. How do I work with young people in a way that is meaningful? So there's need for capacity building. There's a need to assess, well, what have we been doing so far? Where have we made gains and where are the gaps in youth mainstreaming? But then how do we make sure that there's planning now for the future and there's budget enough to support that kind of work going forward? I suspect that implementation of this is going to be the way forward for the future for Anguilla. If we don't do that, what is the repercussion? What you're going to have is a society being created where the young people remain at the margin and not at the center. And so I want to thank you for this opportunity to share just some insights and thoughts around what the Commonwealth does, but importantly also, where do we go if we're talking about this co-creating the future, we're talking about co-creating sustainable future for you. It needs to be with the concept or with the lens of integrating youth perspectives into the wider development discourse, starting with the policy, but not stopping there, connecting with all other development outcomes. So I look forward to your questions as we interrogate these important issues going forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Next, we're going to have Mistress Kimberly Gittens. Mrs. Gittens is an operations officer, social analyst with the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB. She holds a Master's of Philosophy in Development Studies from the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex, United Kingdom, and a Bachelor of Science in Sociology with Politics from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill Campus, Barbados. Prior to joining the bank, Mrs. Gittens was a social development consultant and worked with agencies including UNFPA, IAEA, and UN Women. She has held posts as Senior Projects Officer, Caribbean Policy Development Center, as well as Project Coordinator and Program Analyst with UNDP Barbados and the OECS. Mrs. Gittens coordinated the development of CDB's first youth policy and operational strategy, which was approved by the bank's board of directors in early 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mrs. Kimberly Gittens.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to join you this morning. I want to acknowledge all of you who are in the room and to thank the Department of Youth and Culture for extending the invitation for CDB to be a part of this conversation. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues who are with us this morning from the various organizations, and in particular, Henry Charles, who, as you would have heard in the presentation, was really instrumental in ensuring that we were able to advance work on the youth policy and strategy. It's a pleasure to be here. I've had the opportunity on several occasions to visit Anguilla, to meet with young people who were part of the Job Link Up program, young people from the Albina Lodge Secondary School, and worked very closely with a number of them, including a young man in our who took part in our Vibesing 2019 program, Shamar Gaskin. So Anguilla is near and dear to my heart, and I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation this morning, and I look forward to hearing from you. Before I move on with the presentation, I think I shared a video with the colleagues in Anguilla, and if they could run that video, I'd be appreciative. It's just for a minute, but it's important to start the presentation with a little bit of background on the bank's work.
Hold 1 second. We're getting it going for you.
Thank you very much. I thought it was important to share that video. That was developed in 2019 as a part of the bank's work in developing our first youth policy and operational strategy. But of course, CDB has been in existence and in operations since 1970. So we're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary working in the region. And the bank is committed to helping our borrowing member countries reduce inequality and extreme poverty across the region. And we do this via efforts to promote inclusive and sustainable growth and also to promote good governance. So the work that would have been presented in the video is a summary, but is not exhaustive, of course, of a number of the bank's investments in areas such as education, in citizen security, in economic empowerment and building employability and entrepreneurship skills, and in and ensuring that young people are able to engage in activities that build their capacity for engagement in decision making. As we were working towards our revised 2020 to 24 strategic plan for the bank, we recognized that there was a requirement for scaled up investment in youth development. We thought this was important because young people, you have demonstrated capacity, and you are key agents and actors in the kind of change we want to see, transformation we need for our region. A number of partners have been increasingly committed to the principle of positive youth development, which you would have heard of from Henry and Lane as well. It is important to engage. It's a right for you to be engaged in at shaping your own futures and development. It is important for resilience across the region as well. And it is really just the right thing to do. And so the youth policy and operational strategy that the bank approved in 2020 is actually grounded in our 2020 to 24 strategic plan, and which identifies three key pillars of resilience building, including social resilience, economic resilience, and environmental resilience. And while youth development is positioned under social resilience, the recognition is that youth development is critical across all of the pillars. And the work we do is actually delivered in a manner that is integrated. In order to strengthen our response in terms of youth development, we looked at the work the bank had been doing. We also worked very closely with a number of partners, including all of those who are a part of this process today. We met with young people across the region, including young people from Anguilla, and determined that while CDB's contribution to development had some successes, it could be strengthened by ensuring that our work is done our programming is youth responsive. So youth mainstreaming should be scaled up, that we would of course have youth targeted interventions, but we would focus in a significant way on mainstreaming youth development across our operations as well. As I said, our focus would also include positive youth development. We would be working with young people, employing a life cycle approach, working with young people across the region from 10 to 35 years old. The approach to youth development being grounded in Eric Erickson's theory of psychosocial development and looking at the fact that there's interconnectivity across the several stages of human development, and that the various positive or negative factors that young people experience during each life stage impact subsequent stages. So while we recognize that we need to scale up our work on youth development, we thought that we would look at the age categories used in youth policy across the region, and we would look at the lowest age cohort and begin there, because we want to have those early interventions. And critically for us, we wanted to ground our work in strengthened multi-partite and intergenerational partnerships, recognizing that the experience of the older folk and the energy and transformative ideas of some of our young people, the combination of this is important to answer a number of the challenges in the region and to capitalize on the opportunities that are presented. So working with Henry and a number of young people across and our partners working in our BMCs, we identified 6 pillars in which our youth work is grounded. Some of the work is ongoing work, existing work, and we've also bolstered the areas in which we will work as well. So the language that is presented in Black represents work that we will continue, where there are some changes that are where some changes have been proposed. The work in green is work that is relatively new to the bank and or new areas in which we will be delivering support. And so if you take a look at the slide, you see that we will be delivering a program of support, which looks at coaching, training, looking at incubators and accelerators for youth innovators and entrepreneurs. And that's under the pillar enhancing young people's participation in and contributions to sustainable economic growth. When we undertook the research, we found that this was the #1 priority for our young people across the region, and it forms pillar 1 of our work. Critically, there were gaps in financial literacy, and gaps as well in terms of our government's capacity to anticipate the labor market needs, the skill needs in the region. And so this is an area of support that we will be delivering under the pillar. As you know, CDB also invests quite significantly in civil works, road works, constructing education facilities, water projects and the like. And what we are proposing here is a lens that allows us to better integrate youth considerations in our infrastructure interventions as well. So not solely looking at technical assistance support, but also how do we bolster the participation and the positive benefits from youth via our infrastructure interventions, which form a significant portion of our portfolio. In terms of work in education, our youth policy aligns with a number of policies in the bank, including our education and training policy and strategy, our gender equality policy and operational strategy. And so this policy does not stand alone. As I indicated, it's linked as well to our strategic plan for 2020 to 2024. And so what is presented is not an exhaustive look at all of the work we're doing that will benefit young people, but what we are committed to doing under the framework of the youth policy and strategy. And so we've been doing work in early identification systems, working with our education system to craft and to identify the kind of criteria that help us determine who may be more vulnerable to facing challenges in the education system. We've been bolstering support via technical and vocational education and training programs and building life skills for young people, including young persons who are not in education, employment, or training. And what we are proposing to do is to build a program of support for actors in the education system, as well as our parents and caregivers, so that they have a better understanding of adolescent development and health, and to embed these programs in our education projects. We've talked to, we've heard this morning, and I'm sure yesterday you looked at the imperative of youth health, youth safety, having nurturing and peaceful communities and spaces for our young people, and that is one of our pillars as well. And so we are looking to bolster our work in the area of citizen security, but with a stronger focus on youth leadership and youth co-creation. Also work on psychosocial and mental health programs, facilities for young people, and we will be stepping into the space supporting juvenile justice reform as well. In terms of work, and Lane spoke earlier about the need for young people to be mainstreamed in efforts to combat climate change and to scale up efforts in terms of climate change adaptation. So in terms of climate change, disaster mitigation, food security, and environmental sustainability, we will be working more closely with young people and youth-serving organizations to undertake research, to identify solutions, and to support action across these areas as well. Our 5th pillar looks at active citizenship and participation in democratic and community life. Again, this has been a part of your discussions yesterday, and we've heard about the imperative again this morning, and we will be supporting the establishment of multi-sectoral intergenerational mechanisms for policy that is youth responsive and for programming as well that is youth responsive. Working to support the establishment of mechanisms that are led by youth and that focus on research, analysis, information sharing, education, and advocacy. We will be supporting regional youth stronger regional youth network and its operations, and also delivering a program of support for training young people in leadership. And I think the sixth pillar in which we're working, again, this is a snapshot of some of the work, is looking at building capacity for mainstreaming. And of course, as I've said, CDB hasn't been in operation for 50 years. And so these efforts won't come overnight. There's a need for us to look internally, and we're currently doing that, to examine how we can revise the way in which we work and bolster the way in which we work to ensure that we mainstream youth development considerations. And this pillar looks internally at CDB's operations and decision-making processes, and also externally to support the countries that we serve. And so, for example, we will be working to support the development of policies in our BMCs and youth-friendly legislation, and delivering the training and supporting the development and adaptation of tools that focus on youth mainstreaming and positive youth development as well. I think importantly, recognizing the need for research for evidence-based decision-making and to inform our advocacy. We will be undertaking research which will be led by our economics department on the economic value of youth inclusion, the converse, the cost of youth exclusion in development. In terms of supporting and partnering with the government of Anguilla, I just wanted to share briefly that we have done work in the country. One of the key projects on which the bank currently works with the government of Anguilla is the Anguilla Community College Development Project. There is a civil works component which is currently being delivered, and we've also supported with institutional strengthening of the community college, and as I mentioned earlier, work in terms of capacity building for at-risk youth, and supporting young people's capacity building in non-traditional areas as well via our Girls Get Tech program. Our support to these particular interventions has now been completed, but we continue support on the buildings around the Anguilla Community College. In 2019, our flagship Vibes In program that promotes youth engagement. We targeted young people from across the region. And in developing that program, we actually consulted with young people from across all of our board member countries. And Anguilla was ably represented by Shamar Gaskin. We are currently in the process of developing our 2020 program, and we'll be advertising that shortly. And we look forward to applications from young people in Anguilla. And we are also currently delivering a policy-based loan. One component of that is the social protection policy, and we are working closely with the government of Anguilla on the delivery of the policies that we have identified as important to advancing development on the ground. And going forward, there are a number of areas we have identified under the pillars, the 6 pillars that are ripe for partnership. And as we go forward, and we have our budgets identified, we will be working very closely with our partners in the Ministry of Education, as well as the Department of Youth and Culture, to get that information out to you. Also, we use a number of frameworks to identify the kinds of support that we deliver in all of our countries. And one of these is our country engagement strategy. So the idea there is, as we ramp up our ability to engage young people, that we will be seeking input from young people, including young people from Anguilla, to help us chart the path for what development should look like in the country context so that we can build our programs out in that regard. From October to December, as I mentioned, we will be working on our Vibesing program. We will also be rolling out a number of competitions looking at getting young people's perspective on transforming the region towards 2030 and beyond, and creating spaces where our young people can come together to give their inputs in terms of how we should program and the kinds of decisions that are needed at the policy level in areas such as innovation, entrepreneurship, mental health, and the like. And what are some of the best strategies that our organization has been using, and or as we should say, for me in CDB, that we plan to use? Because as I've indicated, our policy is relatively new. While we've been delivering work in youth development, our policy was approved just this year to create that strategic framework. And so for us, what is important is capacity building in the bank, as well as for our foreign member countries, including Anguilla. We are in the process of earmarking a concrete pool of resources to support the work in youth development and empowerment. And we're preparing a number of tools, including guidance notes and checklists. And I want to say that a number of our partners, including the Commonwealth Secretariat, have actually been in the youth mainstreaming space for a much longer time. And so key to our work is the kind of partnerships that are important so that we're not duplicating work that has already been done. And importantly, a part of mainstreaming for us is building a strong, close feedback loop so that we can have that bi-directional flow with our young people, including young people from Anguilla. And so our commitments reside in our youth policy and operational strategy, in our youth development and empowerment action plan, where we have a number of results, indicators, and timelines to which the bank will commit. And of course, as I've indicated, to creating those frameworks where our young people can really have strategic input at the level of analysis, at designing our strategies and programs, identifying the results are important, helping us build out our monitoring and evaluation frameworks, and also being a part of inclusive and participatory M&E processes, and really ensuring that across the programming and policy cycle, that space is created for meaningful youth participation. Thank you.
Everyone can ask questions, and also about the groups yesterday, you can also ask questions at the end. Next, we have Michelle Small Bradley. Michelle Small Barkley. Michelle Small Barkley is Deputy Program Manager of Youth Development at the CARICOM Secretariat. Before joining the Human and Social Development Directorate of the CARICOM Secretariat, she worked with the Jamaican government as an organizational psychologist and Senior Director for the Modernization Program Implementation Unit within the Cabinet Office, and later as a Senior Director, Youth and Adolescence Policy Division within the Ministry of Youth and Education. Michelle has an MCS in Applied Psychology and professional training in counseling. She is presently a PhD candidate at the University of the West Indies, where she is examining the social mechanism in the secondary school system and their influence on youth resilience. Michelle published her first journal article in 2010 on the influence of social factors and depression systems in children. Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. Let me take this pleasure of extending my appreciation to Anguilla, specifically the Youth Department, for extending invitation to us to be a part of this conference. It is indeed a pleasure for me. From morning, I've been trying to visualize myself being there. I was able to visit Anguilla a few years back while I was in the position of a trainer, and so I came in to train some teachers. This morning it's indeed a pleasure for me, and I just want to say all protocols observed based on the persons who are present. I will share with you my presentation this morning on the CARICOM Youth Development Program. Now, the areas that I will actually cover is a description of the CARICOM Youth Development Program, support to Anguilla's youth development agenda, resources available to youth for Anguilla for networking and partnership, and strategies used for youth mainstreaming and our commitment as the CARICOM to Anguilla itself. Now, just to bring you a little bit closer to the CARICOM Youth Development Program, and notice I use this quotation, investing in youth now for tomorrow's community. That was actually borrowed from a research that was done a few years back that informed most of the things that is now embedded in the Youth Development Program. I noticed at the beginning of the program, a quotation was made that says, nothing about us without us. And I could not endorse that more, as it was a phrase that I came across yesterday and found it rather interesting as I read it. Now, the program itself focuses on youth between ages 12 to 29 years old. It seeks to empower youth across the region through engagement at the regional level. It also facilitates national engagement and also through social and economic interventions. There are two core areas or two main mechanisms that are used in the Youth Development Program, and this is the CARICOM Youth Development Action Plan, otherwise referred to as the CDAP, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors Program. And I'm sure quite a few of you might be familiar with these programs. Now, what is it that the CDAP does, and what's the purpose of it? One of the things that I will share with you today is that research was actually undertaken in 2010, and it was undertaken mostly for the purpose of looking on the issues and challenges that were being experienced by young people, but more so to look on the opportunities that were available then for young people. And so the CDAP was developed or initiated from that main research. The purpose of it really is to improve the quality and quantity of access and opportunities available to young people at school, in communities, and as active participants in economic development, both at the national and regional level. The CDAP also seeks to operationalize the Declaration of Paramaribo on the future of youth in the Caribbean community, and it provides a policy guide for the development of national youth policies across the region. Also, it helps to promote, pardon me, I just skipped a slide. It helps to promote youth mainstreaming and youth integration. No, there are specific objectives that we seek to achieve from utilizing the CDAP. And what it is, it's really a plan, as it says, an action plan. And it's created with the intention of it being implemented across the member states. So even at present, we are actually doing an analysis of the achievement that we have actually done since 2015 to date. Essentially, the objective of this action plan really is to create an appropriate institutional framework to facilitate the delivery of an integrated and mainstream agenda for adolescent and youth development. It also seeks to guide effective and efficient delivery of adolescents and youth development policies, programs, services, and on the basis of evidence-based approaches. My colleagues would have pointed out a few minutes ago in their approach that they use a evidence-based approach in policy development, and it's the same here. Hence the reason why the CIDAP was emanated from a research that was actually undertaken to examine the condition of youth or the situation of youth across the region. It also mainstream adolescent and youth development in a multi-sectoral policy and programming arrangement within government institutions. The CIDAP also seeks to foster genuine participation and partnership with the young people in all aspects of the national and regional development. It ensures investment in adolescents and youth are appropriate to life stages and circumstances. You would have heard in my colleagues mentioned that a life cycle approach is used in the development of their programs and their policies, and it was a similar principle that was used in the CIDAP, as one of the main principles was really looking on the life cycle, because you will know that youth is categorical. Those who are between ages 10 to 18 would form the adolescents. And even within that group itself, there are different needs and different challenges that are experienced. And those that are beyond age 19 onward to 29, even within that group, it's categorical in that their needs are different and the opportunities that are available to them are also different. We also use it as a guide